let's check in with the listeners.
Hey, listeners.
Hi, listeners.
Hello.
Friends, remember you can always reach us at gamescoop@ign.com, just like Kizaru did. Kizaru. We heard it from him recently. He's becoming a frequent writer-inner to GameScoop. On his way to becoming a super fan, I dare say.
It's a nice pseudonym, by the way.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah?
He says, I was thinking about Game of the Year nominations. Who isn't? Steve, remind us what our 10 nominations for Game of the Year are.
Oh, nice. Thanks for that. All right, so we've got Walking Dead, Unfinished One, Journey, FTL, Hotline Miami, Borderlands, Dishonored, Halo 4.
You did pretty good. You're missing.
Really good.
Unfinished Swan.
No, I said that already.
Yeah.
See, you're missing them too.
Everyone's shaking their heads. Where's the other answers here?
All right.
What are we missing?
All right,
4?
Once again.
Let's start over. Borderlands, Dishonored, Journey, Unfinished One, Walking Dead, FTL, Hotline Miami, Guild Wars,
Halo?
Mass Effect
Halo
3.
4, and Mass Effect 3. There we go.
So, Kizaru says, the subject of Journey and The Walking Dead came up as nominees along with the bigger games we've had this year. After thinking about the repercussions of having smaller games shuffled in with the bigger budget games, I realized that although those two are really fantastic games, they really should be judged in a category of their own because the intense labor and high risk involved in big games could never compete against the benefits of small games and the recognition they now get. After all, they are easier to make, easier to take risks with, and don't cost as much by comparison.
That is, and I love you, but that is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, that's a crazy idea.
If you think that Halo 4 is a big risk in gaming, it's not. Or Mass Effect 3 is a big risk in gaming. These are established franchises that made millions.
Well, that's what he's saying. He's saying it's easier to take risks with the smaller games. So it's not fair to compare them.
Well, yeah, it's not fair to compare them because one's made by a small studio and they could go bankrupt if this game goes the wrong way. I don't think Microsoft is going to go bankrupt if Halo 4 doesn't sell well because Halo 4 is not going to not sell well. I don't understand this whole breaking things up in little boxes and saying that the indie guys don't get to go up against the mainstream guys and stuff like that. I mean, on music sites, do they say the indie music album of the year versus the pop album of the year? Or can they just say album of the year?
Well, yeah, they do that. I mean, of course, there is a pop album of the year also.
Yeah.
So I would liken it to the movie industry, right? In the Academy Awards. Michael Bay's latest Transformers movie is certainly up for, it could be nominated if people think it's good enough. Just like The Artist. The Artist is a much smaller budget film, and those two movies are competing against each other. And
So is the video game industry moving in that direction where what's most popular, what makes the most money is stuff like Transformers? Those games do not review well. It's not winning awards at the end of the year.
Mass Effect 3 is
Right,
one
so
of the
this,
best
but are we
games.
moving, is this the direction we're moving to? For the first time, we have, I don't really like the indie label, but we have 3 or 4 games that would be considered, indie, smaller games on our Game of the Year list. I think that's probably a first for IGN.
Mm-hmm.
Could there be more next year? Could the stuff that we like and really want to recognize at the end of the year not be the best-selling games, 5 or 10 years from now?
Mm.
I would say more than just a couple, though, because we've got FTL, Hotline Miami, Journey, Unfinished Swan. I mean, these games are all sort of indie.
Yeah, those are the
Walking
4
Dead,
that I
too.
consider. Yeah, 4 to 5, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the issue, it's funny that he says a game with a huge budget can't compete with a smaller game. I don't understand on what basis he makes that claim. I mean, I'm with Brian. Halo 4 is going to make money,
Yeah, well, his stance is an interesting one because he seems to think the AAA games are at a disadvantage against these smaller indie games.
It's usually the handicap is flipped in the opposite direction where people go, oh, look at these little indie guys. How are they going to get up into the door by themselves?
Well, the danger would be if we isolate these AAA games from being compared to the indie games, there's no reason for them to innovate, right?
Right.
I mean, the whole reason that these indie games do well is because they offer an alternative, right? And that should be a spur to the AAA market, right? It should encourage them to try to take
If
more
we
risks.
talk about movies again, do you remember a few years back there was a little film called The Blair Witch Project, which cost nothing to make and made millions in return?
Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, exactly. And all the big movie guys were like, holy shit, how do we replicate that?
Paranormal Activity too.
And 3 and 4 and 5. I'm slowly catching up with those movies, by the way. They are getting worse and worse.
Yeah, they do get
worse and worse.
It is true. Kizaru is right that a big budget game has, it needs to round out all its soft edges because it needs to make X, millions of dollars. Like this game, we heard about it with Amalur and games like that. Like this game needs to sell 2.8 million copies to break even. And so it has to reach some threshold of a lowest common denominator that indie games can really kind of do whatever they want. And that's not, I'm not saying they're at a disadvantage, but there is something to that. You really need to appeal to a mass market with a big budget game in a way that when you're indie, you can make something just for art's sake.
I don't know that it's not. I don't know that it's a conscious thing. Like maybe some of that is just a consequence of working with a big team, right?
Yeah.
Because some of these indie games are auteured, right? Like it's 1 or 2 guys, or maybe 12 people in the case of Journey. That like, there can be so much more focus on one person's vision.
Yep.
Where if you're working, whereas if you're working on Mass Effect with 300 people,
Sure.
I mean, what's the chance that you're going to make a difference in that game?
Look at games like Resident Evil 6 and Assassin's Creed 3. That
No,
were,
I don't care to
well,
look at
exactly.
those games, right?
And we've opted to not look at those games when it comes to our Game of the Year awards. But those were games with millions of dollars of budget and so many different ideas going into them that they didn't become some cohesive project, right? There was so many different things. And Resident Evil 6 is effectively like 5 different games in one, and no one figured out over there why it went wrong. But then you look at The Unfinished Swan, it's like, we have this idea. It's a whimsical king wants to make a painting. Boom, it's over 2 hours later. And they finished, that was their vision from start to finish.
Yeah.
So I think the mainstream or the big games and big budget games need to be sort of worried a little bit that an indie game like The Walking Dead with a smaller team can come in and take the wind out of their sails.
So you're coming around. You're coming around on this argument now, it sounds like.
In what sense? Well, I think that not that they should be worried that they're spending so much more money, but that having a cohesive vision from start to finish is much better than just throwing everything into the fire at the same time.
I mean, the advantage that indie games have is they can make exactly the game that they want.
Yeah.
They can do it. They can do whatever they want because if it doesn't sell, I guess they need to sell enough copies to be able to make the next game. But they don't have that burden, that pressure on them that this game has to sell 5 million copies.
Right.
Like if you're making Halo or Mass Effect, you're not making the exact game that you want. There's market pressures on you.
But then people change too. Right. Like I'd love to have this conversation if we're all still here in a year and we go, hey, what did you guys think of Walking Dead season 2?
Where are you going? Where are you going to be?
We'll be here.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't know.
An apocalypse. 15 days.
I don't know what sort of sales expectations could be put on them after, they're going to be hit with a lot of nominees and probably a lot of awards and stuff like that. They're up for VGAs and stuff like that. So, I mean, who knows? Things could change. Maybe the Unfinished Swan guy will turn out to be the next Michael Bay.
Well, and then like the incentive is, hey, make another Unfinished Swan for us because we know that that'll sell because it sold last year.
Make another Journey.
I told him that what he should do is the Unfinished One Part 2 should be even more unfinished, and the DLC for that game could actually remove features as you download it.
So you would go you wouldn't make the finished Swan.
No,
You
I would
say
make
less
it even
finished.
less finished.
There are like 16 Final Fantasies, and 3
Sure.
never-ending stories.
Right. But what about the scale of it, right? So like something like Unfinished Swan or Journey or FTL, these are games that are, I guess, digestible in a very short amount of time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And when you're making a AAA game, there's this incentive to pad it out, to make it 40 hours, to make it 60
You got to make it
hours.
worth $60.
And so, I mean, do we think that some of these experiences, if they didn't feel the need to expand so greatly, would actually be better games if they were 3 or 4
I
hours long?
absolutely think so. I was that's crazy you brought that up because I was just thinking about this and talking about this. We did a live stream and had all the creators of these games and when we announced our nominees and I was talking to the guys that made Hotline Miami and I play a lot of indie games. I like a lot of indie games and a lot of big budget games I don't like and it's kind of hard to put my finger on. And I think what I figured out is they have a good idea but then they need to blow it up into $60 worth of good idea, with graphics or padding or this and that, and they don't always get there. Like they feel flabby. Whereas indie games are, we have an idea, and this idea is worth, 3 hours and $10, and they're humble in that way, where they make this experience that, they know isn't a $60 experience, but they have like one good mechanic that they're going to give you this tight experience, and not more than that. They don't need to like sort of slap more than that onto it.
Yeah,
And
which is that's why I appreciate when you hear things like BioShock Infinite will not have multiplayer.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So it'll have a really good single player then, and that's it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's so crazy, though. That is a disadvantage of, I don't think I agree with Kizaru either, but I do think he has a point in that, you're comparing how long is Journey? An hour?
A couple hours.
Yeah,
An hour and
maybe.
a half, yeah.
And you're comparing that to a game that's just gigantic and huge, and like the Academy Awards do have a short film category. Like, there's a bigger breadth in the games industry than there is an album of the year or, movie of the year, for example.
Well, but people are looking at The Hobbit right now and saying, it seems a little drawn out.
Way too long, right?
Like the movie seems to be a little slow. Yeah. Maybe it would be better received if it were more condensed.
Yeah.
That's true.
Will you be the one to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? The one to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot, batteries not included. He helps you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zapper and play games like Duck Hunt or action-packed Hogan's Alley and high-flying Kung Fu, each sold separately? Will you be the one to experience the Nintendo Entertainment System? Comes with Rob, Zapper, Control Deck, 2 controllers, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt.
Moving on, this is David Purdy. He says, some of my favorite childhood Christmas morning memories include when I got Metal Gear Solid for the PS1 and spent hours playing it and eating chocolate. And the year my mother had me convinced I wasn't getting a PlayStation 2 and surprised me with it as I opened my last gift. Do you guys have any great childhood gaming memories?
Yes, I had a similar moment like that with the original Game Boy came out and was one of those things where everywhere you look, people were playing it. Like even adults were on trains, they were on planes playing Tetris, and like I didn't get it. I was like, why is a guy in a business suit playing Tetris? But I was like, I want this thing. It's like a portable, black and white, really crappy looking NES. It's gigantic, but I can play Mario on the school bus. And I asked for a Game Boy for Christmas, and I opened all my presents, and nothing was there. And my mom was like, everything good? I was like, yeah, it's, I got a bunch of cool sweaters and toys I wanted and stuff, but she's like, did you check your stocking? I was like, no. And I checked my stocking. My stocking was like this big, and my brothers were like this big. They had candy canes in them and stuff. And mine had the Game Boy in it. It had like the hologram hands on it playing.
Yeah.
And I opened it and just flipped the fuck out. Just lost it.
The Christmas present fake out is a classic parent move.
Right.
Have you utilized that with your kids yet, Steve?
I haven't faked them out yet. No, my kids. My older son is 7, right?
Okay.
And I think he's just to the point where I could really start messing with him psychologically like that. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. It's too easy to trick a 4-year-old, right? There's no satisfaction in it.
dumb.
Right, exactly.
Just tell you
Claus
anything.
wasn't
Like, there's no Christmas
Wait,
this
what do you
year.
mean
Whoa!
Steve, wrestling's fake too. I don't want to.
I got both the NES and the TurboGrafx 16 different Christmases, and both of them were fake out surprise presents because we would always open presents with my immediate family, just my parents and my sister and I, on Christmas morning, first thing at our house, and then we go to my grandparents where my extended family would be. And on both occasions, like we open all our presents at home, and they're all done. We're like, oh, I guess I didn't get the NES. But then when we got to the grandparents, like there was one like last thing under the tree. It's like, yes, I got it.
You know what I want to do if I ever have kids? I want to do a fake out, but with other video game consoles. I'm like, oh man, you got the Canadian Wii. Right. They're like, oh, no, I'm kidding. It's an Xbox 360. I'm just messing with you.
Nice.
Anything from your childhood, Steve?
For me, mine was actually a gift that my neighbor got. When I was like 5 or 6, my neighbor got the first Atari when it came out. And it was also the day that I realized that he and I were best friends.
Yeah.
You and I are gonna be best friends.
Exactly, yeah.
That's how it works.
So I was over there a lot. But no, I came to really become like a hardcore gamer around the time that I had a job. And so I bought a lot of my own games when I wanted them.
What are you, Justin?
I had the opposite fake out, by the way. This is such a nerdy story. Oh my God. So my family, got all my presents. Oh, Justin, there's one more present for you. And I don't remember what I was hoping it was. Something video game related. But then it was a bike, and I was so bummed. I was like, oh.
What did you want it to be?
The opposite of a bike.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess which is a video game
Yeah.
console.
I mean, I think I wanted a Super Nintendo or whatever it was that I wanted. I don't remember what year that was. There's that, and I don't have any specific memories, but I just remember my first memories of playing video games are around Christmas, like with my cousins and people like that. Like before, and some of the first stuff I ever remember, period, is like being at family reunions playing like Spy Hunter on the NES or whatever, and those are always good times.
After I got the NES, I would get games for Christmas every year after that. And then I have all these great memories of getting games and then going to my grandparents where all my cousins would be, and we'd be all playing all my new games,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Double Dragon and Maniac Mansion. Oh my God.
My-
Friday the 13th, this game kind of sucks.
Yeah. Deadly Towers, what cool box art.
Right.
My dad did that to me one year where he was just like, hey, happy birthday, here's a stack of books. And he was a teacher, and he handed me this whole stack of books that he was teaching his college class. And I was like, thanks. He's like, there's Mice and Men and this. And I'm just going through, and I'm just like, Super Mario Brothers 3, yeah! Just went crazy and threw the books on the floor. Never picked up a book since.
Yeah.
And he's like sitting there just weeping.
He's crying.
Dad's just
What have I
crying.
done?
So disappointed. One more email this week. This is from Ryan. He says, I watched GameScoop for the first time tonight at work.
Oh, hey, Ryan. At work, that's good.
Right.
I'm a bit wary of shows and podcasts of this nature because I'm not at all interested in listening to nerds who think they're funny, make stupid jokes, and talk about nonsensical bullshit for 20 minutes.
Well, hit the little X in the corner right now.
Oh, no, I think it's pretty safe he's not watching this one, right?
I am pleasantly surprised to report that the content of your show was very interesting and informative, as well as non-biased. More important to me, however, is the fact that none of your personalities made it difficult for me to listen, as is often the case when one nerd tries to listen to other nerds talk about nerd things nerdily. I genuinely enjoyed the comments that each host made, and I like that you built on some of the comments without ever letting yourselves get too sidetracked, which I feel is another potential pitfall for these types of shows. All in all, this email is just meant to say I really enjoy you guys and your show, and it made me happy to see your level of professionalism, so much so that I was urged to write a borderline ass-kissing email about it. Whatever, Ryan.
What borderline? That's right. That's total
good.
ass kissing.
That absolutely cancels out because we get terrible comments and emails sometimes. Just like really.
Yeah. But then you get something like this.
Yeah,
It's
then,
like, oh, yeah.
and then the warm fuzzies are good.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks for watching, Ryan. We appreciate it. I think that's all the scoops we have for this week. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Brian. My name is Damon. This is IGN Game Scoop, and we're out.